Hey everyone, this is Dr. Drizzle, and welcome to the National Parks Adventure, Crossing America. Today, we're at Fort Pulaski National Monument in Savannah, Georgia. A special thanks to the National Parks Foundation for our collaboration together. And we're here with Ranger Joel. Ranger Joel, we're in a very special place today. Thanks for having us.
Oh, it's a pleasure to have you.
So before we get started talking about this fort, let's find out a little bit about how you got into the National Park Service. Can you share your journey with us?
Oh goodness, it's a journey indeed. I'd have to say it goes back to probably when I was 11 years old. I grew up in Massachusetts on the Boston Harbor Islands, and I fell in love with a fort called Fort Warren on George's Island, and there was a ranger who answered every single one of my questions, anytime, all the time. And from there, I just wanted to be a park ranger at a fort.
Did you go to school for this? What was your degree?
So I actually went to school for theater arts. I did minor in history, but while I was going to college, instead of going to summer stock theater and working on my craft, I was a park ranger on those Boston Harbor Islands, and just kept sticking with me. So even when I graduated school and went to New York for a while, there was just something that kept dragging me back to being a park ranger, and I was able to get with the National Park Service back in 2001, and I've been to 6 different national parks. I had some wonderful opportunities, and I finally had a chance to be a park ranger at a fort, and so here I am 13 years later.
So your dream came true.
It did.
That great ranger back in the day, I'm glad he answered all of your questions. I see a really good marriage between theater arts, though, and history, because you're interpreting history while you're here. So you've been here for how long?
13 years.
Well, 13 years of learning about this place, Fort Pulaski. I think you've probably got a lot of information under your hat. Can you tell us about this place?
So Fort Pulaski itself is the 3rd fort to call Cockspur Island home. So that's where we are right now. And this particular fort comes into existence after the War of 1812, after the burning of Washington, much like Fort Jefferson and the Dry Tortugas, Fort Monroe in Hampton Roads, Virginia. There are a whole network of forts that are made to help better defend ourselves, potentially from the British or anybody else. So Fort Pulaski was built over an 18-year period from 1829 to 1847. It did utilize a tremendous amount of free and enslaved labor to build this fort. And it was actually never used quite for its intended purpose of defending the United States from a foreign enemy. However, it is used during the American Civil War.
What are some of the stories here that you can tell us? We're going to ask our students to do some research on their own, but what are some stories that you like to share here or interpret here?
So this is a really special place, especially when it comes to all of the stories of the American Civil War. It may not be on the grand stage of things, however, there are bits and pieces of the entire story here. Whether we're talking about the state of Georgia that will send out militiamen to seize the fort from the United States in January of 1861, even before there's a Confederate States of America. There's a battle, of course. Probably for many, the highlight of the battle is talking about artillery and changes of technology, because these forts were originally meant to stop cannonballs. However, there's a lot of technological advancement, and this fort will ultimately need to stop rifled shot, and it doesn't do all that well, and the fort's ultimately breached, and so we begin to see these changes. But what's even more important is not only the changes in technology, but the changes in our society. Because just a couple of days after the fort falls and it's a United States fort again, there's a man by the name of Major General Hunter, David Hunter, and he passes what's called General Order Number 7, which emancipates any enslaved person on Cockspur Island. And this is well before Lincoln's Emancipation Proclamation. Not many people know this, but Hunter will even get himself in trouble. He tries to expand it out a little bit more, and Lincoln will actually reprimand him and have him rescind that order. But the cat's out of the bag. Fort Pulaski is now a spot where freedom seekers can, you know, take great agency amongst themselves and risk their lives because they know that the United States is out here and that they have a chance at a change from being an enslaved person to a free person. So there's a lot that's going on during the war. And by the end of it all, we'll even have prisoners out here. Not United States prisoners, not enslaved, but Confederate officers will be imprisoned here for the last few months of the war. So we truly have a little bit of everything when it comes to the American Civil War itself.
When did the National Park Service get involved with this place?
That's a great question. The Park Service will get involved rather later in the game. After the fort is really decommissioned, there is a lighthouse. Actually, there were two at the time, and the fort would have a caretaker and also some lighthouse keepers out here. But by 1909, even the lighthouses are shut down. The fort sits out here until 1924. That's when President Calvin Coolidge will designate this a national monument. Nothing happens. It's just a designation, but the fort's overgrown. The moats are full of mud. It's not until the 1930s, in 1933, the War Department will transfer the park to the National Park Service. But also this is the time of the Great Depression, so we have the alphabet soup of different agencies like the Civilian Conservation Corps, the CCC, or the Public Works Administration, the PWA. They will do a tremendous amount of work, preserving and restoring the fort. So it's really in the 1930s when this is transformed, again, more changes from an old fort with not much going on to Savannah's National Park.
I've read that with the CCC coming in that they were here for maybe 9 years working. Is that correct?
Roughly around there, about 8 or 9 years that they'll be involved out here.
And they had a basketball team.
They did, absolutely. Every time we hit March Madness, and in fact, there are a couple of images of them, set up, not really playing basketball, but they have their basketball jerseys with the large letter P's on them. Maybe someday we'll have to break those out.
I think so. I think there should be a reenactment of that basketball
That'd be pretty
team.
cool. Yeah, I mean, normally when people come to Fort Pulaski, when we're talking about sporting events, we talk about baseball. One of the earliest images of baseball being played out here was taken at Fort Pulaski. But no, I think it would be an interesting twist with some basketball.
When students come out here, what are they going to find here? Tell us a little bit about the structure of this place and what's out here for them.
Sure. So when students come out here, or when anybody comes out here, they're going to first come out to an amazing island full of all sorts of not only cultural resources like the fort, but natural resources. Before we get to the fort, the whole park is actually more coastal marsh than it is fort, over 5,000 acres of marsh. So you're going to see any kind of animal, you're going to see lots of marine life as well. But once you get to really what I would say is the crown jewel of the park, Fort Pulaski, it's a wonderfully preserved 19th century fort. Folks can walk around, you can see cannon, you can see what I call historical graffiti from some of the soldiers that they left. If you really use your observation skills and you're looking around, you'll even see some of the fingerprints of the enslaved that built the fort.
What is your job here as far as this place? Obviously you interpret and you educate students, but what are your plans for this place? Like, how are you going to keep it up?
That is a fantastic question, because when we're talking about a structure that has been here for, the start of construction, we're getting pretty close to the bicentennial, 200 years from when they started to build this place to where we are today. The fort is actually in really good shape. However, the environment around us is changing. When we think about climate change and when we think about what our future will bring out here to the fort, yes, we have lots of stories to tell. However, we want to be able to tell those stories. And so now we're thinking about different ways on how we're going to tell those stories. Because we're a coastal park, we're right on the water here along the South Atlantic coastline. And in fact, over the last 80 years, we've probably seen about 10 inches of sea level rise here. It's actually pretty amazing. Whenever we have hurricanes and storms and such, we will often make the news because we have a tide gauge that has been operating since the 1930s, since those restoration efforts were taking place. So there's a lot of data. And unfortunately, with that data, the water keeps going up. So we're really trying to think about how are we going to be able to interpret this place with people on the ground. Whether it's when we look at making a new visitor center, what does that look like? What does the fort look like and how we interpret it? But as the water continues to come up, we have to start to make some decisions on how we want to move forward, because there's no way around it. Most likely, if we do nothing, Fort Pulaski certainly is going to be underwater in 30, 40, 50 years, 100 years out. We wouldn't be able to probably stand where we're standing. You'd only be able to be up on top of the fort. So, we have a lot of different kinds of challenges that we have to look at, not only for our near future, but for our long-term future.
Well, I happen to know a few people that might want to help you with that. So kids, I think let's talk about our UN Global Goals today. We're going to help out the Rangers here. These are problems that they're facing right now. In fact, off camera, we talked that they're already having meetings about this. So they really do need your help. We're going to use global goal number 13, which is climate action. We've already heard that the sea levels have been rising about 10 inches in the last few years. We're also going to look at goal number 9. Now remember that that's industry, infrastructure, and innovation. So it's going to take your innovative minds to come up with some plans on how we would preserve this place. The visitor center, which you'll see, is in a place where it needs to be either rebuilt or moved. What would you propose for that? Now, Ranger Joel, we talked about the visitor center over here. Tell me a little bit about this dike system that is around the fort.
Sure. Well, to build the fort, they had to already deal with the water, so they built a dike system all the way around. It's around 2 miles. That's going to be able to stop tides and storms. It's about 12 feet above mean low water. So we're protected unless we have major storms. But as that water level goes up, well, potentially the dike system has to go up.
So they possibly could think of ways to reinforce that or to change that up a little bit. We're going to let you decide what your ideas are, and then we want you to share those ideas with the park rangers. Now, always we're asking for your best ideas. I'm not going to throw the older people under the bus, but a lot of times we as adults will think of a solution but think, well, it didn't work before, so it's not going to work now. We know that you don't think like that. So whatever ideas you come up with, nothing is impossible. So we want you to share your ideas with us on social media. Make sure you tag us at Expeditions in Education. Don't forget the hashtag of Crossing America. Make sure you also acknowledge the National Park Foundation, and you're going to find the credentials for Fort Pulaski running across the bottom of the screen. We can't wait to see what you create. I'm excited because this could make your job a little easier.
Hope so.
With these ideas coming in, because we know that these are future park rangers possibly. And with saying that, Joel, they want to be park rangers. A lot of these kids, we share this with hundreds of thousands of kids, and there's a huge population of these kids that want to wear the flat hat. So can you look in that middle camera right there and give them some advice?
Sure. So if you want to be a park ranger like me, well, first, congratulations. It is an amazing experience, and I hope you're able to live out the dream that I'm living here today. But just keep at it, and just keep going to different kinds of parks, find different kinds of experiences. Just fall in love with these places and fall in love with the folks that are doing wonderful jobs protecting our cultural and natural resources. And as you're going through school, you'll find different kinds of opportunities, whether you volunteer, whether you intern, but as long as you keep that dream alive, it can come true.
And there's a lot of jobs here for them, not just an interpretive or educational ranger. Do you also have people that paint and do maintenance and things like that on the place?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, there's a job for anybody, from whether you're an historical interpreter, whether you're law enforcement. Our facilities team, they do an amazing job making Fort Pulaski just a wonderful place to walk around, to look at. I mean, there's constantly preservation projects that are going on. And of course, there are the folks that are behind the scenes, in our administrative offices. I mean, there's a lot that goes on to make a national park work.
Well, when you get ready to retire, maybe you'll be hiring a few of these students as your replacement.
Absolutely. I hope so.
Thanks so much for having us here today. It is a beautiful place, and we can't wait to explore more of it.
It's our pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you, kids, for joining us for this adventure. We want to thank the National Park Foundation for their collaboration and support. So on behalf of Dr. Drizzle and Ranger Joel, we are out of here. Have a great day.